Welcome back to Math with Mr. P. Today we're going to be going over Chapter 2, Lesson 1, 6th grade math. And today we're going to be dealing with decimals and fractions. Before we dive into the lesson, we need to do something, we need to kind of clarify a little something when it comes to decimals and fractions. So, any decimal can be turned into a fraction. It's just a matter of converting the decimal into a fraction, and I'm going to show you the quickest way to do so. So, for example, 0.25. The book wants us to do a few things. Number one, it wants us to be able to write this in written word and using the correct terminology. And then it also wants us to convert this into a fraction. So the first step is this. The first thing you need to understand is place value. Because this is a 0, we don't say 0 and something. If this were a whole number, I would say the whole number and then the decimal would be and then I'd read this number from left to right, and then add the place value in it. Because this is a 0, we're going to ignore it. It's just going to be 25, and the last thing added to this is going to be the place value. In decimals, right after a decimal, we have tenths and then hundredths. So this would be 25 hundredths with the th at the end. This is how you would say 0.25 in word form is 25 hundredths. Now, in order to turn it into a fraction, we would just put 25 over 100. Then we would simplify, knowing that 25 would go into both numbers. This would become 1/4. 0.25, which is, 25 cents or a quarter, would become 1/4 after this. Now, let's do a quick add to our notes thing. So I know that was rather fast, but let's do this. Let's have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll put the decimal. We'll put the decimal right there. So this would technically be 12,345.6789, or if I were to read this from left to right, 12,345 and 6,789, and this is where the place value would go. This would be tenths. This would be hundredths. This would be thousandths. I probably should not have capitalized hundredths. And then the last one would be 10,000ths. Remember, on the right side of the decimal, I'm going to go ahead and do this a different color. On the right side of the decimal, so after the decimal, everything is going to end in THS, or ths. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So from left to right, if I were to write this as a word and put this in words and not just numbers, this would be 12,345 and 6,789 10,000ths is what this would be. On the flip side, we have ones. Now we don't have ones after the decimal because remember, decimals are partials. They are not a whole, so we wouldn't have ones on the decimal side. That's why we start with tenths. Then we have tens. Then we have hundreds. And I did it again. I capitalized the H when I probably shouldn't have. Hundreds. We have thousands. And we have, pick a color here. Let's do purple. 10. And it's not letting me do this. 10,000s. And on this side, on this side of the decimal, the whole number side, everything is going to end in S. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, so on. So remember to add this into your notes. If you need to add this whole place value thing, go for it. I do apologize for the sloppy handwriting. But this is place value, and this is something that we're going to definitely need to know in order to change decimals into words. And then we're definitely going to need to know the place values in order to turn decimals into fractions. So going back to decimals as fractions, the place value is going to be extremely important because the place values are either going to be in the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, 100,000s, and so on. These are going to be your denominators depending on where the last number in the decimal is, what place value it is. For example, let's pick a random decimal, 0.316. This is going to be in word form 316 and then the place value, tens, hundreds, thousands. So this would be 316 thousands or 316 over 1,000. And then we would simplify later on to see if there's a lower value. Now I know both of these are even numbers, so we could start by dividing by 2 and then continue to simplify down if needed. We're not doing that right now. We are just talking about converting decimals into fractions. And it's just place value. Now if I pick something a little simpler, like 0.7, this is the same thing as saying 7/10 because it's in the 10th spot. This would just be 7 over 10. And this one can't be simplified because 7 and 10 don't share anything. So this would be the fraction. Now, let's focus on the words. This would be written as 7/10. So this chapter does want us to write decimals in written form and then write decimals in fraction form. So it's very important that we are putting the THS at the end when we're talking about decimals. Now, if this were to change into a mixed number, say this was 2.7 instead, this would now become 2 and 7/10. I'm reading from left to right. Whole number, decimal is and our decimal part. Because the original one was 0.7, I don't say 0 and 7/10 because I don't have anything. That's like saying how much money do you have? And you're like, I have $0.50. You don't say that. You just say you have 50 cents. So instead of 0 and 7/10, we just say 7/10. So that's the rule when it's a 0. So let's look at our notes. When converting a decimal into a word or even a fraction, we look at the first thing. First thing is there a whole number? Because the whole number will tell us if I just say the decimal part or if I have to put a whole number and the decimal part. So in this example, 3.5, I would write this as 3 with the whole number, and for the decimal, 5, and I would put the place value, which is tenths. So again, we look at the whole number, then we look at the decimal, and then we look at the place value. So again, whole number, we look at the decimal, we look at the place value. In this example again, it's 3 is the whole number. So I'm going to write 3. The decimal is our and then I read just the decimal as itself, which is 5, and then the place value, tenths. 3 and 5/10. And this would be also 3 as a fraction or a mixed number because remember we have a whole number 3 and 5 over 10. And then you could simplify the 5 over 10 later, which if you did this, it'd be 3.5. Let's try a different one. Let's try 0.17. Whole number first. There is no whole number. That's a 0. So we're not going to put 0 and. So 0 and the and are gone. We are just going to write 17 because that is the decimal. Decimal is 17. And then the place value. Remember, tenths, then hundredths. So this will be 17 hundredths. And that's it. This would be 17 hundredths. And then writing it in fraction form would be 17 over 100. Now, let's try one more before we get into the book. Let's try a difficult one with a little bit more place values. Let's do 4.153. Now, whole number? Yes, there is. It's going to be 4. Actually, you know what? Let's change this. Let's say this is 14.153, because now I have to write the whole number as that. It'll just be 14. 14 and, so again, I checked the whole number, 14 and the decimal, and now I'm going to check what's after the decimal. And what's after the decimal is 153. So I'm going to write that. 14 and 153, and I don't put 153, I just put 153, and then the place value. So again, tens, hundreds, thousands. So this would be 14 and 153 thousandths, because remember, it's on the right of the decimal. 14 and 153 thousandths. Again, tenths, hundreds, thousandths. This would be written as a fraction, 14 and 153 over 1,000. And then you could simplify that later. But this is basically what the chapter wants us to do. So hopefully we added that all to our notes. And let's go ahead and look at what the book wants us to do. They want us to write 0.25 in word form, which we already did. Again, the 0 and the decimal, we don't have to say 0 and. We're just going to say 25 and then the place value, which would be hundredths. So it'd be 25 hundredths. Right? 0.25 is a fraction. It'd be 25 over 100. Then we'd simplify it down. Let's go ahead and do this one. 0.15 in word form would be 15. So let's see if we can write. Let's get our, there we go. Let's write this in word form again. The 0 and will not be there, so I'm just going to write 15. If it will let me. 15, and then the place value, which is going to be hundredths. Hundredths. And remember, we're putting the THS at the end. Write 0.15 as a fraction, or 15 hundredths would be 15 over 100. 0.31 in word form would just be 31. 31, and then the place value, which would be hundredths. And this would just be 31 over 100. And our last example, woodwind 29, 0.29 in word form, again, would be just 29. And then the place value, which would be hundredths. And for some reason, it's not letting this pen work here. 29 hundredths as a fraction would be 29 over 100. Decimals like 0.25, 0.15, 0.31, and 0.29 can be written as fractions with denominators of 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. Any number that can be written as a fraction is a rational number. So let me restate this in order for you to put this in your notes. Any number that can be written as a fraction is a rational number. That means, for the sake of this lesson, any number that can be written as a fraction is a rational number. That means all decimals can be written as a rational number. And when I say all decimals, I mean regular decimals. So if we have like a bar notation over it, it can't be. So we'll get to that. But so any regular fractions can be written, or any regular decimals can be written as a fraction. And any whole numbers can be written as a fraction. We just put that whole number over 1. So whole numbers and decimals, regular decimals, can be rational numbers. So please make sure you add that to your notes. Decimals like 3.25, 26.82, and 125.54 can be written as mixed numbers in simplest form. Mixed numbers are also rational numbers because technically a mixed number is kind of a fraction, and if not, you can turn the mixed number into a fraction. It'll be an improper fraction, which we also will get to later. There's going to be a lot this year. Write each decimal as a fraction in simplest form. 0.6 is the same thing as saying 6/10, so it'd be 6/10. 6 and 10 have something in common. So again, let's look at what the book wants us to do. 0.6. Again, we look at place value. Whole number, we don't have one, so we're just looking at the 6. This will be 6/10 or 6/10. If I divide both of these by 2, I'm going to get 3/5. 3 and 5 have nothing else in common. Therefore, my simplest form is 3/5, which is what it says down here. 3/5. 0.45. Now, they're wanting us to practice in simplest form, so let's go ahead and focus on 0.45. The 0 and the decimal again show us that I have no whole number or and. We're not writing this in word form, so I don't have to say 45 hundredths, but we know that the 5 is in the hundredth spot, so this will be 45/100. Now, I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to divide both of these by 5, because I know 5 goes into 45, and I know 5 goes into 100. 45 divided by 5 should be 9, and 100 divided by 5 will be 20. Always use your calculators to check your work. I'm going to assume I'm right, but let's check. 45 divided by 9 does equal 5. Oh, 45 divided by 5, I should say, does equal 9. And 100 divided by 5 should equal 20. It does. 9 and 20 are not going to have any other common factors. Therefore, my simplest form should be 9/20, and that's exactly what it says in the book. And our last one, 0.375. 0.375. Again, no whole number. We're not writing it as a word form. We're only putting it in fraction form. So this is going to be 375, and over the place value, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Now I'm going to divide. I know that if something ends in 75, I can pretty much divide it by 25. This is where I'm going to kind of try to use my calculator on this one. Just for the sake of this being a quick one, let's use our calculator. 375 divided by 25 would equal 15. So multiply 15. And then 1,000 divided by 25 will equal 40. And I know that that is not simplified at all. It's not. 15 and 40 both still have, I can still divide it by 5. If I divide this, well, let me double check my work, make sure I did this right. 375 divided by 25 equals 15. 1,000 divided by 25 equals 40. Okay, we did that right. Well, I'm going to divide this by 5 anyway. This will now become 3 over, and 5 times what would equal 40? Should be 8, but let's double check. It is 8. 3 over 8. There's no way these two are going to get any simplified because they don't have anything in common. Let's see if we were right. They actually divided both of these by what? Doesn't even say what they divided them both by, but thanks. Well, let's find out what they divided it by. I'm assuming it's 125. Let's see. Calculator. 375 divided by 3. Yep, they divided both by 125. But we didn't know that. We took a longer route, and that's fine. So this, as a fraction, will become 375 over 1,000. In simplest form, will become 3 over 8. They want us to do these. We're going to skip these for this lesson just because we are a little behind on our lessons. But let's work on the math problems for this one, and then we'll call it a day because this is all they want us to do. Actually, lies. They want us to revert a fraction into a decimal. That's going to be easy, and that one's going to be a lot of paying attention. But let's go ahead and do this. It approximately takes 4.65 quarts of milk to make a pound of cheese. Express this amount as a mixed number in simplest form. 4.65. Let's go ahead and do this again. Now, when they ask us to do a mixed number, what a mixed number is a whole number with a decimal, which is what we have here, 4.65. So we know this is going to be 4, and the 65 is going to go over the place value of tenths, hundredths. Now, when we simplify, our whole number stays the same no matter what. So I'm going to put this 4 over here, and I'm going to work on just the 65 over 100. Both of these can be divided. I'm going to divide them both by 5. I know 100 divided by 5 will be 20, and then 65 divided by 5 should be 13. Let's double check and make sure. 65 divided by 5 is 13. Now, 13 and 20 will have nothing in common because 13 is a prime number. Therefore, my simplified fraction of this would be 4 and 13 twentieths, or 13 over 20. And that is the same thing as saying 4.65. So remember, the 6.65 became 65 over 100. We simplified it by dividing it by 5, which got us this, 13 over 20. 13 and 20 have no common factors at all, so I can't divide them by anything. Therefore, I'm stuck here in simplest form. This will now become 4 and 13 over 20. Now, let's talk about what happens when we change a fraction into a decimal. Now, there are a few shortcuts here. When you have a fraction into a decimal, if the denominator is like 10 or 100 or 1,000, I don't know why I put that on top. It's going to be fairly easy to change these. 1/10 would just be 0.1 because it's 1 in the 10th spot. 2 100ths, however, would be 0.02 because the 2 needs to be in the hundredths spot. Hence why I put a 0 in front of the 2. If I just put 0.2, this would technically be 2/10. The 2 would be in the 10th spot. Now, if I change this to be, 14 hundredths, I would just write 14 and make sure that the last number is in the hundredths spot. 65 thousandths would be 0.065 because I want that last number in the number on top to be in the thousandths place. So this would be 0.065. If I put 0.65, that'd be 65 hundredths. So remember, the last digit of the numerator needs to be in the place value part of the denominator. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Now, what happens if you don't have a decimal or a fraction that's that easy? For example, like the book wants us to convert 9 over 12. I can't change this. Now, I can try to change the fraction to have a denominator of 10, 100, 1,000, so on. 12 won't go into 10, 100, or 1,000. This is how we change a fraction into a decimal without having to have a denominator of 10, 100,000, 10,000, so on. You're going to take your numerator and you're going to divide it by the denominator. So this will become 9 divided by 12. Now, we've done this last chapter where we have decimals as answers. 12 won't go into 9, so I'm going to put a 0. I'm going to put a decimal, and now I can annex as many zeros as I want. I'm going to guess and check and say 12 will go into 90, let's say 6 times. Maybe a little short here. 6 times 2 will be 12, carry the 1. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 1 is 7. If I add 12 more to this, if I add 12 more to this, I'll have 84. If I add 12 more to that, I'll have 96. So I was short. That would be 7. That would be 8. So it's going to go in a grand total of 8 times. Ooh, no, it's not. Sorry, this is 90, not 96. Made a mistake. It'll go in 7 times, which will be 84. When I subtract 0 minus 4, cannot do. Borrow. 10 minus 4 will be 6. 8 minus 8 will be 0. 12 cannot go into 6, but because the decimal, I can bring down as many zeros as I want. 12 will go into 65 times, because I know 12 times 5 is 60. Now, back to the original problem. 9 over 12 has become 0.75. Or 75 hundredths. So this is how you convert a fraction into a decimal. You divide and add this into our notes, ladies and gentlemen, in order to, let me go ahead and do a text box here for this one. And I'll move it out of the way. In order to, let's go ahead and move that. In order to convert a fraction into a decimal, you simply divide the numerator, top number, by the denominator, or bottom number. And make sure you guys pause and add this to your notes. Again, in order to convert a fraction into a decimal, you simply divide the numerator, which is the top number, by the denominator, or the bottom number. Again, if the bottom number, and this should be added into your notes as well, if the bottom number is 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, you can easily convert that fraction into a decimal by just putting the top number and ending it in that place value. We'll do a few examples here, and then we're going to call this one a video. Let's convert 3/5 into a decimal. 3/5 is going to be easy. I'm going to show you guys how to do this one. I can do 3 divided by 5 if I want, or I can change that 5 to become a 10. In order to change the 5 to become a 10, I just multiply both numbers by 2. This will become 6 over 10, or 6/10. That 10 looks funky. 6/10 will be the same thing as 0.6, because the 6 is in the 10th spot. And that's it. Now, if I were to do it the long way and divide 3 by 5, let's see what happens. 5 cannot go into 3, 0, decimal, 0. 5 goes into 30 6 times, which is 30. And I still have 0.6, which is the answer I had here. So either way is fine. But I could convert that 5 to become a 10 easily by multiplying it by 2, and then I'd have to multiply the numerator by 2 as well. So that's why the 3 became 6. So that one was a pretty simple one. If I look at 14 over 25, that one also is one we can convert easily. I know 25 will go into 100 4 times. So if I multiply both of these by 4, that'll give me 100 and 14 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1. 4 times 1 is 4 plus that. This will just be 56 hundredths, which is the same thing as saying 0.56. Now, let's use our calculator for a faster track. Let's see 14 divided by 25. Should be 0.56, which is exactly what we got here by converting that 25 to become 100. So, easy examples there. Let's see if that third example is not as easy. That third example is 250. Okay, 102 divided by 250. I can change this. I can. I'm trying to see if I can change it down to become 100, which I don't think I can. And I know for a fact I can change this up to be 1,000. Now remember, your denominators need to be 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and so on for this to work. It cannot just be 200, 300, anything like that. They have to be the family of tens. You just add a 0 to the end of it because that's how each place value goes up. Now, in this case, I can do 102 divided by 250, or I can do this. If I count by 250s to 1,000, it's going to be 4 times. 250, then 500, then 750, then 1,000. So if I multiply both of these numbers by 4, I'm going to get 1,000 as my denominator, and it'll just be whatever 102 times 4 is. This is going to be the easier way. 4 times 2 will be 8. 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 1 is 4. So this will be 408 thousandths, which is the same thing as saying 0.408. And I'm going to double check. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So yes, 0.408. And remember, when we do examples like this, we need to make sure that we are putting in the work like we did here, because you could easily do this, and this is not showing your work. Doing 102 divided by 250, which would still give us 0.408, but it doesn't show you the work. So either one of those ways would have been fine. This is just an easier way, and this is an example of how you can convert denominators to be 10, 100, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, so on. That's all for this lesson. Again, recapping what we've talked about, they want us in this lesson to learn how to write words or decimals as words. So again, we look at whole numbers. We look at the decimal. And then we look at place value. We also learned that if a fraction has a denominator of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, etc., all we need to do is put the numerator in a decimal in that place value. So for example, if it were 6 over 100, this would just be 0.06 because the 6 needs to be in the hundredth spot. That is the hundredth spot, so it becomes 0.06. If this were 62 hundredths, then this would become 0.62 because the last number is in the hundredths spot. And we also learned that if we have a fraction that can be converted into a 10, 100, thousands, whatever, all we need to do is change it 6 over 10, which would become 0.6 or 6 tenths. And then we also learned that if you cannot do that, in order to convert a fraction into a decimal, we divide numerator divided by denominator. 9 divided by 12, and this would give us our decimal. Again, that went in, I believe it was 7 times. 12 times 7 was 84. Yes. When we subtracted, we got 6. 12 doesn't go into 6. 12 goes into 65 times. So 9 over 12 became 0.75. That is it for this lesson. Please join me for lesson 2 later this week. Thank you. Bye.